This is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. Are you living your life authentically, the way you thought you always wanted? Do you think you should be happier than you are, considering all that you have? What is the purpose of your life? What is spirituality? Have you achieved your personal and professional goals, but still feel racked with insecurities, anxiety, and depression, and can't figure out why? If you've ever asked those questions, then you're going to love the exploration of today's interview. My special guest is Dr. Anna Yusim. She is a board-certified psychiatrist with a private practice in New York City and best-selling author of Fulfilled: How the Science of Spirituality Can Help You Live a Happier, More Meaningful Life. She's on the clinical faculty at Yale Medical School, where she's creating a mental health and spirituality program. Dr. Yusim completed her undergraduate education at Stanford University, where she studied biology and philosophy. She attended Yale Medical School and the NYU Residency Training Program in psychiatry. She has traveled, lived, and worked in over 50 countries and presented at numerous national and international medical conferences. She has published over 70 academic articles, book chapters, scientific abstracts, and book reviews on various topics in psychiatry. You can learn more on her website, annayusim.com. I want to tell you a little bit about the book. It has personal anecdotes, stories from her psychiatry practice, scientific research, and hands-on exercises. It consists of 3 parts. In part 1, she explores this concept of authenticity. It has 4 chapters: reclaiming your life, owning your truth, embracing your shadow, and living your purpose. In part 2, she talks about soul correction. Has 4 chapters: improving relationships, releasing addictions, transforming fear, and harnessing personal power. And part 3 is part of something greater. This is my favorite part of the book. Again, it has 4 chapters: synchronicity, consciousness, interconnectedness, and immortality. If any of the concepts and topics are intriguing and of interest to you, you will definitely love this book. For full episode show notes, ways to work with me, and as a listener, you always get 10% off on all my packages. And additional resources on parenting, visit my website, authenticparenting.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and follow me on Instagram to see behind the scenes and a little bit of my life. I am very active on Instagram and I post almost daily. And now, please enjoy this thought-provoking conversation with Dr. Anna Yusim. Anna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So I found your book in my local bookstore. I was just browsing one day with a friend. She said, let's go to the bookstore. Sure. And we were just looking, and I just grabbed this book, right? It's it's interesting. So I'm like, Fulfilled. First, I looked at the name and I said, oh, she has the same name as I do. Interesting. And I didn't even, read a few pages or anything like that. I said, wow, this is the book I really need to get right now. I think this book is calling me. And so I purchased it without reading a page or a passage from the book, which I usually do before making a commitment to a book, right? You want to bring a friend home. And I brought it home and I couldn't put it down. I was so, intrigued, immersed in the wisdom and the knowledge and the exercises and the amazing questions that you have, that you pose such wonderful, clever questions. So, what was your inspiration to write the book? I know it's based on your journey. Why now? Why Fulfilled?
Right, right. And what you described, your experience with the book kind of calling to you and you just purchasing it and it being there for you at the right time, at the right place. This is something that I actually cover a lot in the book, this concept of synchronicity or serendipity, when things happen when we least expect it, but it ends up being exactly what we need. And with things like that, it's kind of this greater sense of the universe guiding you in some way, shape, or form. And I say the universe because that's a non-religious kind of secular term to describe something greater than ourselves that can be a source of meaning, purpose, and guidance in our lives. Some people, instead of the universe, could use the word God or source or collective consciousness or whatever it is that makes them feel connected. And in answer to your question, for me, why this book and why at this time? So I wrote the book a few years ago after I had undergone, I guess, a really big chapter of my own personal journey, which was starting my practice. At the time the book came out, I believe I was in practice already for 8 years in my private psychiatry practice in Manhattan. And I had accomplished something. It's funny that I even think of it as an accomplishment because it's really not an accomplishment. But for me, it was such an important part of my life, which was meeting my soulmate. It was something that I'd put energy and effort into, but not something that you can really will because there is something greater that guides that hand. And so this book came after I had met my soulmate, started my practice, and had the book, as you know, contains about 50 cases of patients from my practice who have undergone different trials and tribulations and struggles that have helped them to own their own personal power, become empowered with who they are inside, to live more authentic lives, to release fear, and to connect to something greater, to really live their lives from that space. So that was why the book was written then.
And while I, read the beginning pages, I quickly learned that you also come from the same part of the world as I do. And I was like, that's it. This meant to be. That's it. I'm contacting this woman and I'm going to have her on my podcast.
and that's exactly what you did, right?
And that's exactly what I did. And at the time when I contacted you, this whole COVID-19 was already happening in the world and in the United States. We agreed, via email, and then I didn't hear from you. And I had this deep, dark sense, oh my gosh, I hope she didn't get coronavirus because she lives in New York. And this is very, a bad timing. And I wanted to reach out and ask you, but then you wrote to me and you said that both you and your husband had and recovered from coronavirus. So I want to ask you about that. How are you now?
Yes, definitely. And this whole thing, COVID-19, coronavirus, it's something that really just took us, obviously, and our world by storm. We had this predictable life that we were living. We knew what our days were going to look like, what our weeks were going to look like. There was uncertainty, but certainly not as much uncertainty as was presented to us when this virus came into the world. This was just astronomical in terms of the fear, the pandemonium, the terror that it created. And for myself, when my husband and I got it, I had a very mild case. My husband got a more severe case. He even had to go to the hospital for some oxygen. Thank God he didn't need a ventilator and he stayed there a relatively short time and then came back home and is now fully recovered. Thank God. But it was very, very scary because you can't visit anybody when, COVID-19 is in the hospital. So he was in the hospital alone. I was able to still Skype with him a lot, but the whole situation was just like, why is this happening? What is the meaning of this? And at the same time that my husband and I were experiencing this, I have a psychiatry practice with over 1,000 patients in it. My patients were all going absolutely crazy. Everybody was either, because we're in New York City, affected by it themselves. They had either themselves, family members, husbands, wives were in the hospital, and or they were affected financially. Like I have people in real estate, nobody was paying rent. I have people who were losing their jobs, who were being furloughed. And I have a huge percentage of my patients who are doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers who are actually on the front lines. And they, you could argue, were affected most of all of anybody. There was not enough personal protective equipment. They were feeling betrayed by hospital administrators, by the government. They didn't know what to do. They were walking into a war zone. And I have a number of people tell me, I didn't sign up for a suicide mission. This is absolutely crazy. And then shortly thereafter, I had a friend of mine die who is a doctor. He was a frontline doctor in the emergency room, Dr. Frank Gabrin. And for him, it was just such a scary case because he had the symptoms. And then one day he had shortness of breath. Shortness of breath is the scary symptom of corona that if you have it, hopefully it will go away. But if it doesn't, that's when you need to go to the hospital. So his husband called 911, but before 911 got there, he had already passed away. It was just such a scary thing. And which shows that we really don't understand how this virus works or what it does, but it is just so sinister. And so this is the reason that you didn't hear from me, because I was fielding so many things, both in my own personal life, but also with the people who I so deeply care about in my practice and among, friends and family. So it's been a really difficult, crazy time. That's kind of the more personal perspective. And then, the follow-up question to that is, what do you do with that? How do you make meaning and purpose from this? So the answer to that is we have no choice, but we have to look for it and find the silver lining. There is always a silver lining. On the other side of fear is faith. On the other side of terror is love. And we have to tap into those parts of ourselves and be able to be guided and to know that this too shall pass. We don't know when it will pass or how it will pass, but this too shall pass, and it's going to shape us. Every single generation prior to ours has had something defining, like a war, or in the Great Depression or the flu epidemic. A lot of us have been through things like this in terms of natural disasters. You, Anna, shared with me personally, you were affected by this, obviously, and we had the 9/11 attacks. But this is one of those defining things that so many of us will never be able to forget. And it's a wrinkle in time, like it's a part of our life that is going to be one of the most defining moments. So we have to find a way to make it meaningful and to find the optimism amidst our despair.
Yes, well said. Yeah, well said. Indeed, it's a historic moment, like you said, a wrinkle in time. And the fact that it's happening on a global level, that's what's striking, right? Like the
Absolutely.
earthquake, the earthquake I experienced, it was just a very local experience. But again, the whole world poured in to help and it became sort of global. But this is insane how everywhere it's happening. I speak with people in different parts of the world. I connect with family and friends, and it's the same reality. It's sort of, we have connected on this level of tragedy or crisis, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And because I've worked for 10 years now as a psychiatrist, I have patients who have started in New York City, but now live all over the world. And so whoever I speak with, whether it's a patient in Serbia, in Paris, in Australia, in Russia, everybody is affected. There's no one who has not been affected. There's been people who are affected much less, and thank God for that. But everybody has a part of their life that has been brought into this. And, spiritually, we kind of say this term without people really knowing what it means, that we're all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Usually that from a spiritual standpoint, it means that we're one unified soul, that when another suffers, we suffer, and that we're connected not just on the level of matter, but as energy, that we're all these energetic beings that are able to empathize and feel each other's pain. But at no time has this idea of interconnectedness been more concrete, tangible, and real than now.
Yes, I think about it almost every day. And that's what gives me hope and, makes me feel more positive that this will end. And there's this amazing interconnectedness that I feel every single day, this gratitude for what I have, for the people in my life, or for the things that we took for granted. I think we're reminded of the important, even the smallest things, right?
Absolutely. And that's the other side of all this, that in the midst of despair, the human spirit and the human potential can overcome anything. And, when I was working in Rwanda after the genocide, you saw how strong those people were. When all of their family members were killed, they still stood strong. They still had a greater belief, and they went on not just surviving, but helping other people, finding meaning within themselves and the capacity to be able to give to others, finding a way to let their own light shine. And so this is what I'm working on with all of my patients, and especially my frontline people who are already so much of service. How do you transform your fear to faith? How do you transform your fear to love? And how do you every single day go forward from that space and have the certainty that 100% you are going to do what you can. You're not going to succumb to fear, because fear and the pandemonium that results is even more contagious than the coronavirus. And fear weakens us. Fear, depression, anxiety weaken the immune response. You don't want to go into the world with that. You want to go into the world with confidence and certainty that you're doing your part, that you're doing the best that you can, and that you're controlling the part of your life that you have control over, which is your attitude and your actions.
Mm. Yes, you traveled the world quite a bit, and you studied all sorts of things in different parts of the world. I'm very impressed by your personal story.
Oh, thank you so much, Anna. Yes, for me, traveling and learning about other cultures and other people, that was really the most powerful education I had. And my other education, my medical education, was secondary. I feel like it was really learning through life and being able to meet different people, see how they see the world, see how they understand healing. Wherever culture you go to, there's so many different beliefs about how we heal. And to me, it was fascinating because obviously I was taught and taught in great detail one very, very powerful and entrenched belief system, which is Western medicine. But there's so many other ways that we can heal through the power of faith and through the power of belief and changing our mindset and attitudes. And that's really just a whole other, dimension that's been added to my own capacity as a psychiatrist by virtue of having those experiences.
Mm. Did you get pushback for incorporating, traditional medicine and spirituality into your practice, or did you have discomfort, perhaps in the beginning?
Yes, I had personal discomfort because I didn't know how it was going to be met by my colleagues, by my patients. And to be clear, not all of my patients are interested in spirituality. And I have many patients who aren't spiritual at all, and that's completely okay. And basically, as a doctor, you meet the patient where they're at. You never project your own belief systems onto them. What I like to do with my patients who are interested in a spiritual approach is really understand what spirituality means to them and to incorporate it to the degree that they want into their own healing process and healing journey. Now, as far as my colleagues, after I wrote my book, I did have doubts. I was like, well, am I going to be discredited? Am I going to be that psychiatrist who believes in woo woo stuff? But amazingly enough, the opposite happened. And my book was well reviewed in a few scientific journals, including the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease. And then shortly after that, I was offered a faculty position where I went to medical school, which is at Yale Medical School. And so I'm on faculty there as a lecturer. And now I'm in the process of starting a spirituality mental health center there. So I think what this speaks to is the fact that at this point in time, academic medicine and our society is much more ready than it's ever been for this incorporation of a spiritual world into our scientific infrastructure. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's so exciting to be a part of that.
This is exciting because you write about synchronicity, energy fields, telepathy, intuition, and I love the book for that reason, because these are things that I secretly held inside me. I was like that. You talk about a particular person, I think Suzanne or Susan in your book, who has these thoughts that premonitions, and you yourself had this slip of a tongue moment you call in your practice, that something about a patient that they haven't told you yet. I had so many of those experiences, and I always thought I must be crazy or there's something wrong with me, until it's not easy to talk about those things openly, right? But coming from a medical doctor, highly accomplished with a scientific background, I mean, I know your background. It gives a lot of credibility and weight and lifts this sort of shame, I guess, that for the rest of us.
Yes. And that was the whole point. And I'll tell that story that you were talking about with the slip of the tongue. And this is a patient. He was a priest, actually, that I was treating for quite some time. But at the time that the situation you're describing happened, it was about 6 months into our treatment. And somewhere in the midst of our therapy that day, that priest, Mark, says to me, doctor, it's so hard to come to therapy because I feel as though I bare my soul and I leave here just exhausted. And I responded something akin to, well, Mark, I get it. I mean, sometimes therapy can be exhausting. I know you may want it to feel like a massage where you leave feeling relaxed and completely at peace. And sometimes that could happen. But those times that you feel exhausted, it means that you release something really substantial. Now, that's not a strange thing to say. Maybe it's an appropriate response, but the only part that wasn't exactly appropriate was mentioning this idea of a massage to a priest.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as those words left my lips, I was like, why did I just say that? That's so weird. If I had consciously planned my treatment and consciously planned what I was going to respond to my patient, I never would have made a reference or, a metaphor of a massage to a priest. But I said it. And as soon as I said it, his eyes got wide and he looked at me and he's like, that's so strange that you say that, because this whole massage thing, because the real reason I'd come to see you, which I haven't even told you about, is because I have a lot of guilt and shame about having gone to all these massage parlors. This is something that I do. It's a dirty little habit I have. And now that you brought it in because of what you just said, I can finally tell you about it. And so that moment, my slip of the tongue, where I mentioned a massage to a priest, which I never would do if I was, consciously planning this treatment, ended up being this really catalytic moment and enabling Mark to open up to me in a way he hadn't before. So, and I think, these things happen because we read people and we read each other, not just on the level of the mind, but we also read what's unspoken. We will intuitively sense in, and people communicate with us in so many different ways. And I think our empathic capacity and our intuitive capacity makes us all a little telepathic, gives us a telepathic ability that we can pick these things up. And I've had multiple experiences like that with patients where something comes out and I'm like, what? Why did I just say that? And it ends up being important. And so after this happened to me, I then went and I read about these sorts of cases in the medical literature. And it turns out that it's actually happened to many, many other therapists and psychiatrists. And a woman named Janine DePayer, actually a colleague and friend of mine, a psychoanalyst also in New York City, wrote a review article of all such cases called, I forgot the name of it, but I think it was Uncanny Coincidences and the Porous Mind. But her name is Janine DePayer, DePeyer. And so if you want to look up her stuff, I'm sure it is on Google. Mm-hmm. But I, by no means, am the only one who's had these experiences. And I think it's so important to speak about them, to kind of, demystify and to let other people have permission to be able to speak about things like this too.
I completely agree. I have those moments with my clients too, in real life too, with friends and people who I feel like I always had this kind of experiences with people who I'm closely entangled with. I have an intimate relationship, or maybe it happens on a distance too sometimes. Yesterday, a fresh example, I remembered a classmate of mine, and I was talking to a friend about this classmate of mine. And I said, I don't know her last name. I don't remember, because this was 30 years ago. I completely forgot her last name to look her up on Facebook. And I said, who knows, do I have a mutual still friend that I keep in touch with? And I said, I remembered a woman that I'm connected on Facebook. I went to bed thinking, I'm going to contact her, even though I haven't spoken to this person for 2+ years. I'm going to wake up in the morning and send her a text and say, hey, do you remember Miriam? What was her last name? And the funny thing is, I woke up in the morning and I had received a text from that friend who is in Montana, and she says, "How are you? How is your family? How is things, with the coronavirus?" I'm like, wow, she contacted me first. I was thinking about her the whole night.
Wow. Wow. And do you want to know like a crazy little synchronicity that just happened with you
Yes.
saying this?
Yes.
Right when you said the word Miriam, I just got, because I'm doing this for my phone, a phone call from a woman named Miriam. Of course, we're all, the weirdness, right? The weirdness continues, right? You can start going down this rabbit hole, but it's amazing that, you thought about your friend and there you were, their contact was made.
I know there are little small things, but there is one striking case, and I'll get back to your interview again because I'm so excited to talk about this with someone who endorses this. I had a client. I'm very in tune and attuned with my clients empathically and intuitively. Like I know their problems and it helps me in my work. It's not always 100% correct, right? But there is that knowing, this energetic, unspoken connection. And I was working with someone and I knew he was hiding something he hadn't shared yet. And I knew it was about alcoholism. And if you knew this person, you would never think that he is an alcoholic or he had some issues. And so I didn't know how to approach the subject. Obviously, I will never directly ask someone, do you drink alcohol? Are you an alcoholic? I didn't know how to ask that question. But then during the session, I said, what is your relationship with alcohol? And here is the power of the questions that I so much love that you have in your book too. The same question can be asked in so many ways, but when it's asked in a very, succinct or clever, in an open-ended way, some questions are just amazing openers. They can lead to healing, or I find that through the podcast too. And so he immediately started sharing the story. And that was the pivotal moment of the healing and the whole work that we were doing. And he asked me, how did you know? I was going to keep it a secret, that part of my life from the therapy. And I just said, look, I just know. He said, did my ex-wife call you? Or no, nobody called me. I just knew. It sounds ridiculous, but there are things that we know, but
Exactly.
we don't know how we know them.
Exactly. That's so powerful. And I think it's wonderful that you use your intuition with your patients in that way. And then you didn't, just say, you opened it up to the patient to be able to tell you. He had the choice. If he chose to hide, he could have not told you. But because of your use of your own intuition, you welcome that part of him into the treatment, which is beautiful.
Yes. So what is spirituality? First and foremost, can you define it? Can you define it?
Sure. Yeah. The way that I define spirituality, and there's obviously many definitions, but I define it as a connection to something greater than oneself, which for some people could be to God, for others to the universe, for others to source or a collective consciousness, or a set of global values that indicate transcendence, like values like hope and trust and perseverance and love. So, whatever spirituality means to you, you don't have to be religious, you don't have to believe in God, but you do have to feel connected to something greater than oneself. And what spirituality is, it's actually transcending the self, going beyond the self to recognize your true purpose and what you're meant to be doing in this world, what your soul has come into this world to do.
So your book has basically three parts, the three cornerstones of being fulfilled. First one is authenticity, which of course I love and resonates with me and with my work. Second is soul corrections. And third is connecting to something greater. Can we speak about authenticity, what it means to live an authentic life? How can someone know if they are their authentic self? I get that question a lot. They say, Anna, how do I know if, I am living my authentic life, like I am authentic?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great question. I get that question a lot from patients as well. And authenticity is really aligning with your soul and aligning with the part of yourself that, just like you were talking about before with your intuition, it's making some of your most important life decisions, not necessarily with rationality, but from your soul, from that space of intuition. Because it's very easy to make rational decisions our whole lives that take us to places that we're like, how did I really get here? You feel disconnected from yourself, and you realize that the reason you chose this profession or even married this person or are living your life like this isn't because that's what you wanted, but it's what society expected of you or your parents expected of you, or somehow or another you got those messages as to that's what you need, as opposed to connecting to the deepest essence within you and really asking, what do I most deeply want? What will enable me to feel fulfilled? And how can I share my light, my capacities, my abilities, my experiences with the world in a way that will elevate the consciousness of others? So I think authenticity comes from being able to distinguish who you are relative to all the expectations of others, and then to align yourself with that self.
What I know you talk about a lot in the book, and I really like that about stream of consciousness, writing, journaling. Mm, what kind of exercise or perhaps a question you can pose for the listener in terms of seeking authenticity, connecting to their soul, connecting to themselves?
Yes, yes. So I would really start to do a little stream of consciousness exercise on the question of what do I most deeply want? That's the first question in the book. And when you do a stream of consciousness exercise, you need to let whatever comes and wants to come through you to come through you. So when you do stream of consciousness, you just write without stopping. You don't take your pen or your pencil off of the paper, or you don't take your fingers off of the keyboard. You don't stop to think, to be rational about it. You just go, go, go. And if you don't have anything to write, you just write blah, 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 or whatever until you have something else to write. And you do it for 5 minutes straight. And you don't go back and change anything. You don't go back and judge it. You don't go back to edit. You just write, write, write for 5 minutes straight. And then you can review it later, or you can actually just put it aside, because the idea of the stream of consciousness writing work is to let things come through you and to let things that don't normally come out of you to really come out.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good one. You also talk about the notion of surrender, and I really want you to talk about it on the podcast too.
Yes. And surrender is this concept when you've done all you can. You've tried to you want to materialize something in your life. You want to manifest something. You want to accomplish something. And you've done all you can, all that you think you need to do in order to accomplish that. Then at that point, you need to surrender. You let go and you believe that a force greater than you is going to take over. And that force greater than you is a benevolent force, and it wants your greater good. And it wants to co-create and partner together with you. You have done your part, and the surrender is then being able to say, you know what? Now I trust. Now I have faith. Now I'm going to take my foot off the gas pedal, and I'm going to let God or the universe or Mother Nature or whatever your idea of source is, I'm going to let source do its part.
So it's not complacency. It's not giving up. It's not. It also involves taking some action. Correct?
Yes, because you're a co-creator, and you're not just. If you lay in bed, like if you need to manifest and want to manifest your soulmate, and you just lay in bed all day, the likelihood of it happening, can it happen? Sure. Someone can call you. Hey, guess what? I think I met your soulmate. I need you to go meet this person. That could happen. But if you're co-creating with the universe, you want to take your steps, get on an online dating platform, go out to a party or two to meet somebody after, our quarantine is over, of course. Yes. And then in addition to that, you also say, you know what, I'm doing my part, but this idea of a soulmate, it really is something much greater than me. And so I release, I surrender. The other part of surrender is that whatever you most want, you also have to be willing to let it go. Because the other part of surrender is that I want this so badly. And I think the universe wants this for me, but there could be something even better in store for me that I have no idea about. Or that for whatever reason, I want this thing so badly, but it might not be in my best interest, or it might not be in my best interest now. Or it might show up in a way that I completely don't expect. So whatever it is that we most want, to have ultimate fulfillment, you have to be willing to let it go as well. And that's a Kabbalistic concept.
Yes, I do want to ask you about Kabbalah, which I know nothing about. And of course, you had this synchronistic moment and you came to learn about it and you talk about it in the book. Can you maybe briefly say what it is? I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, so Kabbalah, there are so many different ways to connect to something greater. When I was looking for, when I was traveling the world and kind of trying to find other ways of understanding healing other than Western medicine, I went to learn Buddhist meditation in Thailand, and I went to learn Kabbalah in Israel, and was in ashrams in India. And all of them presented different ways of healing. And what Kabbalah is, it's the mystical commentary on the Torah. The Torah is like the Hebrew Bible. And so Kabbalah is being able to use principles to look within in order to unearth and release your own so-called garbage inside, and therefore elevate your soul. And as you elevate your soul, you raise your own destiny to a higher and higher and higher level. So it really is a pathway of how you can release the things that are holding you back in life, and concrete steps of how you could use ancient Kabbalistic wisdom to be able to look outside and see the darkness outside as a reflection of yourself and thereby transform it.
Mm-hmm. I heard you say that in Kabbalah, you're presented the same lesson 3 times
Yes.
to learn, right? Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So if you are trying to work through something, and if you're trying to release something like a pattern in your life, often, and this is what my Kabbalah teachers have taught me, you'll be given that same lesson 3 times. For instance, if you have a habit of attracting men in your life who are a little abusive and you're trying to break it, the next 3 guys who you're going to meet all are going to have a little edge of that abusiveness. And what you need to do is every time choose, this is not for me. I've moved past this. God bless that person, but this is not for me. That's not my story anymore. And so 3 times you say no, and then you're going to draw in someone totally, totally different.
I had someone write to me recently, one of my podcast listeners, who has gone through divorce, and he has lost, his family, his wife, and he attempted suicide and things like that. And he said, I really want to I don't know how I can be happy anymore. He wants to find happiness. I'm wondering if you could say something to the person who feels like they lost their happiness. How can someone in that place turn things around and find hope and fulfillment and joy, perhaps, in the future?
Definitely. So out of the greatest darkness also can come the greatest light. It's when we are in our deepest pain, if we're able to surrender, if we're able to find something greater to connect to and say, you know what? All of my hope is lost. I need you to just lift me up. And I know that you can, and I trust that you can do this. And to have that faith, you will start to see shifts in your life. You're going to start to see people coming into your life who are going to offer the right guidance, who are going to offer you the right kind of help that you need. You're going to see the kind of books that are going to inspire you to change. What this person has undergone, which I have certainly been through, and which probably most people on some level have been through, is a dark night of the soul. Those dark nights of the soul are also the periods of our greatest awakening. And on the other side of them, when we overcome them, we end up being different people, and life opens up in a whole new way.
You also talk about frequency, vibration, energy. I love all of that stuff, for sure. How can we keep our frequencies high? What would you recommend? And how do I know if my frequency is low, first and foremost? And you talk about in your book that there are certain people we feel so deeply connected to. They have this aura, and sense of calm and peace. I've been told that I'm that type of person, which is great. But how do I know if my frequency is low, and how can I raise it?
Right. It's such a good question. It's such a good question, Anna, because all of us are going to at times fall, and we all have a range of frequencies that we live at. And we have, times that we could be sad or depressed or lonely or afraid or angry, and that will lower our frequency relative to the times when we feel happy and fulfilled and joyful and loving and full of faith. And that's when we will raise our frequency. And the main way that you raise your frequency in times of darkness, well, first, you can't just push away emotions. You have to let yourself feel those emotions, because that's honest and real and authentic. That's really, really important. But you also can't wallow in those emotions long enough to then fall deeper and deeper and deeper. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to use your emotions to really learn about yourself, and then to go into your deep crevices of darkness, but use that darkness to transform into light. And to do that, you need tools. So really, it's about having a number of tools in your arsenal that when you are feeling dark, to be able to find the light. And those tools can be multifold. It could be exercising. It could be calling someone you love. It could be reading an inspirational book. It could be doing a little bit of yoga. It could be asking yourself, what am I grateful for? It could be reminding yourself of the things you've accomplished and what you feel happy and fulfilled for in life.
So sort of having this toolbox always filled and ready, I think it's a good idea, knowing what's going to help you, because dark times always rise. We're not always happy. There is sadness and things happen in the world, in our lives. That's a great suggestion, to know what works for you, to have this toolbox ready as a resource or something like that. In the time of emergency, reach out and say, what's my plan? What can I do after being with your feelings? So I also want to ask you about something. I heard you say that having difficult conversations, you do with heart to heart as opposed to mind. I just love that.
Absolutely.
And in parenting, oftentimes to partners, to co-parents, there are difficult conversations about discipline and other things. People usually go at it mind to mind. How can you, what it looks like, this heart-to-heart conversation? How can someone step into that heart-centered place to start a conversation?
Right. And I think with that is that first you have to tap into your own heart. It's so easy, especially if you're upset or angry or something like that, to be able to just yell at a person from the space of your mind, or to be upset, or to try to be controlling, or not to be able to understand the other person's point of view. But I think it's so key first to connect to your own heart. And before you have difficult conversations, if it's possible, not to come from a space of anger or judgment or resentment, but really come from this idea that we're all just doing the best we can. And when you think about it, usually we are. And if a child is misbehaving, or if another disciplinarian, if you disagree, there's usually something there that is there to teach you. And if there's conflict outside of you, a really good way to think about it is, okay, well, everything outside of me is a reflection of something inside of me. So what inside of me needs resolution? And then suddenly you obviously are going to do what you need to do and have the talk from a heart-to-heart space. But then you start to look within and say, how does this reflect what I need to work on in myself and the things that I need to change within me? And then it's a whole different question.
Well, Anna, I can speak with you and go deep into different the rabbit holes, but I want to be respectful of your time, and maybe we can connect again. I want to thank you for your presence and the wisdom and everything else you're doing in the world. Stay safe and be well. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure, Anna. Thank you so much.